What's up, everybody? So we are back. It's episode 7. It's just me again, obviously. And let me tell you what I want to talk about today. It is time now that President Trump is going to approach Congress with his tax plan and start to work out the nitty gritty, the kinks of what is going to happen with the new tax plan. And, obviously, we all expected this, I think, which is that he was just going to try to expand and build on the original tax plan from 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Now, I'm sure there's mixed feelings about this, but if we just set our politics and emotions and everything aside for a second and just look at the numbers, there are a few things I want to point out to you today that I found kind of interesting. And even at the time that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act came out, I wasn't too convinced of some of these things. And as time went on and I did a little research and some comparisons and, actual case study of my own cases, I think you'll be interested. So here's the big topics that I think are important that he's kind of going into this with and campaigned on and wants to do now. And it's obviously important to know because if this goes into effect, essentially, I think the majority of it will start next year. Maybe we'll see a few things happen this year, much sooner rather than later. So here's the list, and I'll go into all of them in detail. We have no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security income, no tax on overtime income, renewing certain pieces of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017, adjusting the SALT cap, which was kind of part of that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but it's something that's very often spoken about, and people are quite distressed about it, especially the higher income earners. And I'm not talking even about millionaires and billionaires, just ordinary higher income earners. The carried interest loophole. That's something interesting. I haven't really spoken to anyone about that before. And what else is there? There's the tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners. It's kind of interesting. I'm recording this pretty much right after the Super Bowl, so it's interesting to talk about. And the last one is tax cuts on products made in America. Now, there's going to be a lot of other things that happen as well. We don't really know exactly what they're going to be, and we don't even know if any of these things are going to pass. But this is what's being campaigned on, and especially with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act potentially sunsetting at the end of this year, regardless of what does or doesn't happen, we need to know what to plan for and just be aware of these things so we can act quickly when they happen. So let me kind of start at the top. No tax on tips. Obviously, this was one of his groundbreaking campaign points when it came to income tax. And I mean, tax on tips is huge. We have in the United States about 4 to 5 million allegedly tipped earners. I'm sure there's probably a bit more than that, but this is what's kind of accounted for. So it's 2.5% or so of our population that we can account for. And only 50% of them, based on studies and surveys, actually report their tipped income. Even though we all go to the, wherever, coffee shop, restaurant, movie theater, wherever else you go that you tip your workers, oftentimes we're doing it on that credit card receipt, penciling it in. But those who come from the tipped worker industry, especially, they tend to still tip in cash because they know what the difference means to that person. For ordinary people that it's just not at the forefront of our mind. It doesn't make you a bad person or anything. We just don't really think about it. They swipe our card at the restaurant. We pencil in the tip. It's written down there for us. It's easy. We go on our merry way. Tipped workers definitely appreciate cash tips still for obvious reasons. I don't suggest you do this, but obviously many people who make cash don't really report it. It's just the reality of our world, right? So only 50% actually report tipped income on their tax returns and pay the income tax on it, and the Social Security tax and the Medicare tax. And only half of those people supposedly tell the truth about their tipped income. So maybe they got $100 in tips last night, but they only showed, 30 or 40 because the logic of a human is going to be like, well, I'm doing something, so I'm going to be under the radar, right? They're not going to find out about me. And by the way, generally, how the government finds out about whether tipped workers are reporting their income or whether there's illegal workers, meaning they don't have a Social Security number, they're not allowed to be working somewhere, are working somewhere, or if people are just getting cash pay off the books entirely, is Government will just send in a mystery shopper if you never heard about it. They'll send somebody disguised as a regular shopper to your pizzeria or optical or wherever you work that it is to figure out what's really going on there. Usually they have a hunch that something's going on. Usually it'll be in cash heavy businesses like coffee shops and pizzerias and construction and things of that nature. And so they'll send in an undercover mystery shopper to try and figure you out. And that's how people end up with big penalties, deportation, things of that nature, which obviously is a big topic these days also. So good to be careful around there. So the point of saying all this is that if tipped income is no longer taxable with federal income tax, and we're just going to talk about federal income tax mostly today, that means people might be more inclined to report their tipped income. Now, even if there's no income tax, you do still have to pay Medicare and Social Security taxes on that tipped income. So people may still be inclined to not report it, but these days, or always really, you want to buy a home, you need to report income on your tax return to buy a home because most lenders are looking at that if you're an ordinary employee, not a business owner. And reporting your tipped income on your tax return may help you there, especially if you're not incurring a large income tax on it. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, that will also give the federal government a better idea of how much money is really in circulation and being used, which can make for better planning for the federal, state, local governments all across. So I think that could be potentially great. And of course, and we'll get to this also on the next topic, Social Security is depleting, as we all know. It's expected to mainly run out within the next 10 years if significant changes aren't made. And if we get to that point, it's going to be the benefits are going to be reduced for people who receive Social Security at that point. And so by reporting your tipped income and paying into Medicare and Social Security tax, we help that Social Security income bucket a little bit. Now, I always say this, people my age, I don't know that I'm relying on Social Security income when I'm in my 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm kind of I am paying into Social Security, but just because I have to, not so much because I want to. I'm kind of relying on other types of investments to keep me afloat when I can't work as much as I do now anymore and still, need to support myself for living, medical, etc. So kind of leads me to my next point, which is no tax on Social Security income. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be no Social Security tax. That means for recipients of Social Security income, there's going to be no income tax on that Social Security income. So right now, if you're a single filer and make under $25,000 and some change per year, or you're a married filing joint filer and you make under $32,000 and some change per year, your Social Security income will not be taxed. If you make over that amount, though, up to 85% of the Social Security income you receive can incur a federal income tax. So that really hurts a lot of people. Now, it's estimated that about 50% of Social Security recipients right now rely on their Social Security income to make their rent payments or mortgage payments or medical payments or whatever it may be. Doesn't mean that they only receive Social Security income. They might have 401k income or, rental income from rental properties, other investments that they have. But even with all that, they're still relying on Social Security income as well. Now, if you do receive income from a 401k or an IRA, or some other investments throughout the year, defined benefit plans and regular brokerages and so on, things you've built up through your lifetime, not having to pay income tax on that up to 85% of your Social Security income can make a huge difference for you. That can be your rent payment. That can be your car payment. That can be your groceries, even at the price that they cost today. That could be a carton of eggs. It could be a carton of eggs saving $1,000 on your taxes, So that could be a big one. Now, who knows? Who knows if this will happen? I don't know. The point I wanted to make is that, of course, when you say that something is not going to incur an income tax, we need to find money in the budget to replace that tax revenue, most likely. So, and also people might get worried that like, oh my God, I'm, 5 years or 10 years from retirement. I've relied on Social Security my whole life. This is what I've been promised. We never really even spoke about this issue, that Social Security, that bucket might run out, might run dry. So they're worried this is not going to impact the Social Security bucket, not directly at least. So that's that. Now, the other one was no tax on overtime. It's very difficult to estimate how many people work true overtime in the United States because overtime is generally put on those people who work hourly because you're counting your hours. The employers are counting their employees' hours, and if you're exceeding 40 hours a week, or I think it's 42 and a half hours a week if you provide a paid lunch break, paid 30-minute lunch break daily, then we know those people worked overtime. Maybe they worked 50 hours for the week, 60, 70, and so on. Now, there are so many salaried workers who work tons of overtime. They're just not paid for it because they're salaried workers. Tax accountants who work for a big firm, they're working on a salary. Maybe they receive, incentives during tax season. But you better believe that during tax season, they're working 80, 90-hour weeks for 12 weeks in a row. So having to pay no tax on overtime income is huge. Not only because you're receiving income without having to pay tax on it, but overtime is usually 1.5 times pay or even double pay in some places. I think California is one of those places, for example, where if you work like some extreme number of hours per day, maybe it's like over 12 or 14 hours, they'll pay you double time, which is huge. Sometimes when you work on holidays, a company might pay you double time. So again, really big. And same issue, this takes away from, tax revenue for the federal government, and they have to pull it from somewhere else, which is probably where whatever DOGE is supposed to be, the Department of Government Efficiency, what they're supposed to be doing. If they're doing their job right and we're actually saving tax dollars left and right in all of these places and continue to do so, it's estimated to be $1 billion a day now, but it's only been a couple of weeks. Who knows if that stays that way or if we end up finding other things to spend money on. That could make up for this loss of revenue, which would be huge. We should be concerned about ourselves, right? We're working hard. We pay sales tax, property tax, income tax, you name it, it's estate tax, inheritance tax, gift taxes, like you name it, we're paying taxes on it, right? Over and over and over again. How many times does a dollar you earn get taxed while it's in your pocket even? Crazy. This is obviously big for overtime workers, not just because they won't have to pay income tax on the overtime pay. They might be able to afford to work less overtime and potentially create more jobs for someone else to get a little bit of overtime or whatever the case is. So that could help. Now, where there's something like this introduced, law like this introduced, there will always be people who take advantage of it, right? Not in the good sense of taking advantage of something. So, employers might negotiate with salaried workers to make them hourly workers so they could pay them overtime, but maybe pay them a little bit less because the overtime is not going to be taxed. Like that's an idea that like jumps into my mind when I first think about it. I've seen these shenanigans growing up in Brooklyn, New York, all too much without these laws being in effect. So I know for a fact it's going to happen left and right everywhere now if this does go into effect in any form that it does get accepted in. So, that's no tax on overtime. There's not much more to say about it than that. But, if you're one of those hardworking blue collar Americans that's putting in that overtime, this is huge for you and I'm really happy for you. You deserve it. You really do. Now, renewing the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, there were tons of provisions in there. It was one of the biggest tax overhauls we've ever had in the country, and certainly the largest in like the previous 50 years or so, maybe even close to 60. So that's big. Now, here's the thing, and this is what I wanted to kind of get into with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I made a little chart for myself here to refer to for this. When that happened, the initial thought was, and this is always going to be the initial thought, whether Republicans are putting tax cuts, tax laws in, or Democrats or independents or whoever the hell, far left, far right in the middle, doesn't matter. People are always going to say you're helping someone who's not me, because we love to be victims. Let me explain to you, and I think that the biggest conversation usually happens around the middle income class. And the middle income class makes up, I think, about 50 to 60% of the population in the United States. The rest of the other 40 to 50% is going to be made up majority of the lower income class, of course. And then the rest will be the upper and the upper middle and upper income class. So people always think, the millionaires are being helped, tax cuts for the rich, it's always for the rich, it's always for the rich, et cetera, et cetera. So the middle class is defined generally to be whatever 2/3 of the median United States income is to 3 times the median United States income, what that's going to be. And that amount takes you from roughly, I believe in 2023, it was $53,000 a year to about $153,000 a year for a family of 3 in that household. Okay, let's call it 50K to 150K is the middle income, considered to be the middle income class. Obviously, things have shifted over the years with the increased cost of living, groceries, property taxes, rent, and et cetera, somewhat disproportionate to the increases in, or even, let's just call it what it is, stagnation in wage increases relative to real estate and other costs of living. But having said that, I ran some charts for the middle income class. So I took a family of 3, 2 parents, 1 young kid, 5 years old, and I gave them a couple different criteria. So at $125,000 in gross income, pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, so before 2017, with the standard deduction that was in place, the personal exemptions that were in place, the child tax credit, and the phase-outs for the child tax credit specifically that were in place, that family ended up paying roughly $15,500 in federal income tax. We're not counting Medicare and Social Security taxes from your paycheck here, just federal income tax, because that's what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act impacted. It didn't impact Medicare and Social Security taxes. Now, that same family in the post-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act era, so we'll use 2023 tax grids for this, the same family that paid $15,500 in pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act now paid actually $11,000, just over $11,000 in tax, federal income tax for the year. They got a tax break. Okay. That same family, if they had itemized deductions, meaning property taxes, mortgage interest, state and local income taxes paid, charitable contributions, the big conversation around that was that the middle to upper middle class people got hurt by this, especially those hurt by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, especially those who lived in high income tax states like New York, California, Connecticut, Illinois, for example, and high property tax states, or a combination of the two. The conversation about this was that they were getting impacted poorly, negatively. All right, so here's a family who also made $125,000 in gross income for the household for the year. They have the 1 child. It's 2 parents, 1 child living in the house. And they would have pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act about $22,000 in itemized deductions. So I believe the numbers I put in there was $10,000 in mortgage interest, $5,000 in property taxes. It came out to about $10,000 in state and local income taxes, maybe slightly less than that, like $8,000 in state and local income taxes. What's up, everybody? I just wanted to interrupt for a quick second to say, please, if you're enjoying this, like this video, bookmark it, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me a lot. Share this with your friends. I appreciate you all as always. And now back to the video. That family would have paid just over $13,000 in federal income tax that year. The same family in the post-Tax Cuts and Jobs era that had the SALT cap on, which limited the combination of your property taxes and your state and local income taxes paid throughout the year at $10,000, a cap on that, plus the rest of your itemized deductions, mortgage interest, charitable contributions, any sort of medical expenses that exceeded 10% of your gross income. Not only that, we had to keep in mind that the standard deduction went up a lot in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It essentially doubled from prior to that. So a lot of people who were itemizing their deductions before, sorry for my stuttering there, trying to formulate my thoughts a little. A lot of people who were itemizing their deductions prior kind of switched to being in the standard deduction. And just because of that flip, just because it was called something different, they're like, I got screwed. I got screwed. I can't believe it. What did they do? Blah, 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 blah. That same family whose itemized deductions got limited, instead of paying a little over $13,000 in taxes, they paid a little under $12,000 in taxes. They did better. The same family making $250,000 a year, okay, prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, paid about $48,000 in income tax. And by the way, I did the 250 because that was kind of like the threshold where people started to complain heavily about the SALT cap, because at that income, you can imagine people are paying, first of all, a higher state and local income tax if you're living in one of those states. And they probably own a home. They likely own a home if they were financially savvy, and this is what they wanted to do, especially when you have a family, right? And so they had property taxes as well. They were getting limited. So that family, pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, paid $48,000 in income tax, roughly higher than that, a little bit higher than that. They went to paying $42,000 in income tax post-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They got limited on their itemized deductions. They, thought they were losing out. They ended up paying less. Here's what people neglected. And it's not even so much neglect. It was like the lack of education about this. And understandably so, because nobody ever teaches anything about this. You don't learn about it in school. They don't really talk about it on the news. So where are you going to get it from unless you know to ask your accountant or you follow a page that talks about this, Not only did the standard deduction change, which helped a lot of people and hurt some people, but also the tax brackets changed. We had a tiered system that went all the way up to 39.6% in federal income tax, plus other added taxes, the additional Medicare tax, 0.9%, the net investment income tax, 3.8%, those two still exist. We went to a maximum federal income tax of 37%. You might think those 2.5% don't make that much of a difference, but when you're in the $500,000 plus income to be at that tax level, you do the numbers, it makes a difference. Not only that, the 15% tax bracket became the 12% tax bracket. The 25% tax bracket became the 22% tax bracket. The 28% tax bracket became the 24% tax bracket. So things shifted, things widened. Not only that, and this is one that I haven't really seen anybody talk about, but the quote unquote marriage tax went away. There used to be this like phantom tax called a marriage tax. It wasn't actually something that's on your tax return or in your paychecks, but people kind of always knew if I get married and we start filing jointly, we somehow end up paying more in income tax. And it's because of the way that the tax brackets were structured when you went from single to married filing jointly, because they change. The percentages are the same, but the income range is different for those percentages. When the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act came into play, those income ranges got widened because we had a few less tax brackets, and because the tax brackets got a little bit lower, some of them got lowered. The ranges got widened. Because the ranges got widened, that marriage tax went away. You'll see now, ask your accountant. If you're a pretty simple household, a couple of jobs, even if you have a small business, you have a kid or two, you live in a house, whether you file separately or you file jointly, the chances that your refund or amount due is going to be significantly different is minor. I never crunched the numbers on this and I didn't look it up, but I would guess it's less than 5% of people run into a problem going from filing as single or married filing separately to going to married filing jointly. Keep that in mind. So yeah, oh yeah, here I did have the brackets here. So it looks like the only one that didn't change actually was the 35% bracket, which whatever. It stayed about the same in terms of the income range too, apparently. But yeah, the that's incredible. 15 became 12, 25 became 22, 28 became 24, 33 became 32, and of course 39.6 became 37. And not only that, 39.6% was for people making over. Well, I shouldn't really compare these because the numbers go up for inflation also. And this is pre 2017 to almost 2023. So never mind that last point I was going to make. I'm going to shut my mouth on that one. So that's something to understand with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And if an expansion or a renewal does not pass this year, we're going to revert back to those old brackets. By the way, the child tax credit went up. It doubled from $1,000 to $2,000 with Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the phase out threshold where you get phased out of a tax credit, because you don't get a tax credit no matter how much you make. Once you make a certain amount of money, the credit goes away. The phase out went up by more than double. It went from $100,000 in income, or 110, to $250,000 in income. So more people qualified for the child tax credit. Again, politics aside, emotions aside, forget about the face that's up there and the team around them. Just brass tacks. These are the numbers. These are the numbers. Everyone in my circle benefit from it. Not to talk about self-employed people, which especially, if you've been paying attention to anything after COVID, how many people went to contract work, went to being self-employed, went to being entrepreneurs, went to, working remotely, whatever. And the qualified business income deduction helped so many of these people, including myself. That 20% deduction on the profits in your business, whether you were just a sole proprietor or an LLC or an S corp, that really, really made a dent in it. If you had $100,000 in profits in your business on the year, you ended up paying tax on 80 of it, not 100. That's huge. Of course, there's limits on that also. Especially if you're like your regular white collar professional, your doctor, lawyer, accountant, and pretty much every personal service that's out there. We got limited, but again, you're starting out as a business. You're trying to creep up on the scale. You're catching a lot of help from the qualified business income deduction. I really hope that one sticks around. That was it for those. What else did I have here? So adjusting the SALT cap now. So for everybody who was complaining about the SALT cap, that state and local income tax plus property tax cap of 10K, the conversation is about potentially doubling it. I mean, if it gets doubled, and you're in a non-income tax state or a low income tax state income tax state, chances are all your property taxes are going to qualify. If not all, then most for most people where it matters. Again, those people who won't benefit from that still are the higher income earners, the millionaires and billionaires that we all complain about anyway. So, that's that. They'll find other ways, as they always do, as they should. So that's about adjusting the SALT cap. I mean, I think that's good. I think that'll help people. That'll create more tax deductions. That will allow you to battle inflation better, at the supermarket. You keep more money in your pocket if you're one of these people that relies on the SALT cap or the avoidance of it. So there's that. Now, the carried interest loophole, I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on this because I don't deal with billionaires, but or very wealthy people, hedge fund managers, etc. Basically what happens with the carried interest loophole is that these companies, so this is commonly spoken about, how Wall Street got rich. Essentially, these hedge fund managers, these venture capitalists, the VCs, people who invest in companies, people who run mutual funds, where your retirement account money is invested in mostly, they make tons of money. They make tons of money. But because it's deemed investment income for them, they're able to avoid ordinary tax rates on that income. And instead, they pay long-term capital gains tax rates, which cap out at 20%, whereas the ordinary tax rates cap out at 37%. And again, if you are somebody that wants to tax the rich, you should want this loophole to go away. You should want all of the income for hedge fund managers, mutual fund operators, venture capitalists. You should want it to be considered ordinary income versus investment income. I mean, there is no way that a hedge fund manager, a venture capitalist, can argue that they are just passive in a company. It took time to research the company they're invested in. It took time to research the stock, or hundreds or thousands of stocks that their mutual fund or hedge fund is investing in. Those people are making ordinary active income. I'm all about paying your fair share. Again, if this happens, they will find other ways to avoid income tax. They will shift what they do. Something will happen. There's that. Now, tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners. I mean, keep in mind, again, like, we don't know if any of this is going to pass. Tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners. The thing about sports team owners is that they have one very particular luxury, which is capital improvements to their athletic clubs. Whether it's rebuilding a stadium, whether it's improving a stadium, buying equipment, all of these massive capital expenditures for capital improvements come with tons of tax breaks from the local government, from the state government, from the federal government. And not only that, but they get to take advantage of all of the real estate tax breaks, depreciation, and so on. And so in those years where those sports team owners do these massive capital improvements, and by the way, keep in mind, the chances that they're using their own money from the bank for these improvements is slim to none. They're likely getting that loan from somewhere else, using their sports team and all the infrastructure that it owns as collateral, right? And so once they do that, they end up offsetting pretty much all of the rest of their regular income, whatever their other businesses are, whatever they're involved in. And this has been a break for a long time. And what President Trump's proposal for this is to get rid of this type of tax break or limit it significantly for those sports team owners. So again, if you want to tax the rich, potentially this is something that will do that. I do want to make a point though. Anytime, we live in a world and where just power is key, and just you can't do anything about it. It is what it is. And those are those these ultra wealthy people are the ones that kind of carry a lot of power. And what to keep in mind is when minimum wage goes up, when the cost to operate your business goes up, when New York installs its, rush hour tolls, whatever the congestion pricing that they called it, when any cost of conducting business goes up for the business owner, they're the business owner. They don't want that cost. They're going to pass it on to you. McDonald's is going to increase the cost of the Big Mac. The trucker delivering Zins to a grocery store in New York City is going to increase their delivery fee. The billionaire stadium owner, sports team owner is going to increase the service fees at the concession stands or on the tickets or whatever. It almost definitely passes through to us. So that's first of all why I say, take this with a grain of salt. This might not pass to begin with because it could impact us in a worse way than it does now. And the other thing is, just don't be upset when that does happen, and do expect, if this is something we're lobbying for, is higher federal minimum wage, higher congestion pricing in New York City, higher tolls, higher taxes for the rich, less tax breaks for the ultra rich. It's likely to trickle down to us. So no easy solution for that one, and believe me, I don't have one for you to offer. Not yet, at least. All right, and the last one here is tax cuts on products made in America. The talk of right now is about tariffs, and if we're placing tariffs on other countries, we're the ones, as the ordinary, lower middle, upper middle class taxpayer, we're really going to take on the burden of that because we're the consumer. We're buying those products. The prices on the products are just going to go up from the products that we're importing, and one way to battle the impact of those tariffs that we're placing on other countries for however long that's going to be placed on them is to decrease the cost of producing products here in the United States to the extent that we have the ability and the resources to produce those products to begin with, whether it's, the rare earth minerals or the space or the geographic location or, things like that. So potentially giving tax products to companies that make their product completely in the United States could be huge. How they're going to do these tax cuts, I don't know. It could be a number of ways. I mean, the things I could think of is tax credits for hiring employees to work there. Certain tax breaks or bonds offered by the government to build your infrastructure out, like your warehouse, your factory, etc. In the United States. Maybe a corporate tax break. They talked about going from 20% down to 15. Maybe that's going to do it. There various incentives can happen from a tax perspective. I'm all for Made in America. I'm all for foreign born workers working in America. I'm all for importing and exporting goods and keeping up good relationships with other countries. But if tariffs is something that's going to happen anyway right now, and there's no control over it, then giving a tax break to us here, I think, fairly justifies the potential negative impact of imposing tariffs on other countries. So those are my 2 cents. Again, for those who know me personally, I'm a pretty rational and moderate guy. I don't care. I don't care what the face is in there. It's not about the politics. It's about, what's better for us, what's better for our growth, our development, our safety, our peace of mind. I hate hearing when the Fed gets up there, when Jerome Powell gets up there and talks about, to decrease interest rates, we need to increase our unemployment. Like, I get that there's a particular way that it works on the back end, but I hate hearing that we have to intentionally create artificially unemployment for the United States worker. I mean, that stuff is crazy to me. And so if we can come up with these other ways to make it more beneficial for more businesses to open, for them to operate legally, operate with integrity, hire more people, treat them well, treat them properly, that's a huge help for us. And I'm all for it. That's what I have to say for today. As I always mention, please, I do want to try and develop this and talk more to you guys and bring more information, especially as, right now there's probably going to be a lot of breaking news from the tax side of things in the government. Please like, subscribe, share this with a friend. I really appreciate you all. Send me, if you guys see, by the way, those ridiculous TikTok and videos and YouTube shorts and Instagram reels and etc. with people making crazy claims about tax breaks that you can make, and whatever they're saying doesn't make sense to you, there's a reason it doesn't make sense to you. You're not stupid. It just, the plan is stupid. Send it to me. I will watch it here while I record this, and I will do a live reaction for you and let you know what I think of it. And maybe it's a great thing. I hope it is. Oftentimes it's not, but at least by reviewing that, I can respond and let you know what is the right thing and really break it down. So that being said, thank you so much for tuning in as always, and I'll see you guys soon. You can't get enough.